this is an interesting matchup in the sense that it's almost two goldfish decks. They are going to be interacting not a whole lot with each other, a little bit here and there, but not much. This is Javier Dominguez on Boros Cycling versus Arne Huschenbeth on Orzhov Auras. They're going to kind of be doing their own thing here, Paul.
Yeah, and I have to say, I do like Arne's side going into this because he has more interaction. He does have ways to kill some of these creatures that Javier can play that can maybe pressure Arne's life total a little bit. In addition, very, very importantly, he has Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize allows him to nab those Zenith Flares that could potentially, put the last few points of damage in for lethal for Javier. So he's got ways to interact while also putting pressure. And the nice thing, too, is he doesn't really need to play around it much removal here against Javier, right? The only removal spell Javier has is Sweltering Suns.
And he's got that at the ready here, but he doesn't actually have a second red mana source just yet. He did just find one now, but he won't be able to deploy that Sweltering Suns. The window closes very quickly when it comes to Core Spirit Dancer as well. That may have been it, although he does get a hollow one on the battlefield here.
He does have a hollow one, but we got a Core Spirit Dancer here, and we untapped.
That's all you really want.
That's all you really want, and this Spirit Dancer is going to be huge. We have a Demonic Vigor. We have a Sentinel's Eyes. And we can even play out a Deadweight here to shrink down the hollow one.
I don't know if you saw, but there was a head shake there from Javier. Just said, I just needed another red mana source off the top, and I could have got the job done, but nope.
Yeah, but it's one of those situations where you could have gotten that one off the battlefield, but then, of course, we know that Arne had the backup.
That's right. There's another Core Spirit Dancer. It hits the battlefield here for Arne, who has Sentinel's Eyes. That'll get him 2 more cards in the hand, including a Thoughtseize there, Paul. Now, that won't be relevant just yet, but it will certainly be down the line. I like the chippy attack there from Arne as well. Just a little chump check there. See if you're going to block. And Javier says, I know how this game works. I'm going to go ahead and block. Thank you very
Javier
much.
Is
now, this is the real test.
Block.
This is the real test. Because if Arne says, okay, I'll block too, then it's a disaster.
No way. There is no way. You have to take the 4 damage here. Come on. If anything, you block with the O2 if you think Javier is going to play a Sweltering Suns. But I think you probably just want to go ahead here and take it. I mean, Javier only plays 2 copies of Sweltering Suns. So if you want to kind of use math, you can be like, well, he's unlikely to do it. But at the same time, why would he be attacking with this 4/4?
Yeah.
There are levels, though, right? It's like he could be representing it and trying to sneak in for some damage to try to make it so that he's within Zenith Flare range. So,
but you don't want to outthink yourself, right? Because if you lose both Spirit Dancers here, it is bad, bad, bad. The downside's just too high.
He's going to pump the fist here when he sees that there's a Sweltering Suns.
And he figured it out. So Arne Huschenbeth, good for you. Sorted it out, gives a little head nod there, and he gets down tap with this Core Spirit Dancer still intact, and a second Thoughtseize. Really, these are just insurance plans against those Zenith Flares, and that's what he needs. This is coming together nicely here for Arne.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be able to go probably lead off with Thoughtseize, and then he can go SRAM into an Aura and just continue get ahead on cards here.
Yeah,
and we're
maybe
similar...
SRAM into land into Deadweight on the Fox, perhaps?
Yeah, that is an option. And we might get into one of those situations again that we saw Javier in a previous match where he's just going to cycle and hope to top deck a Zenith Flare that can get the job done because, he's not going to be able to muster up much here beyond that.
Okay, so there it is. Deadweight to take down the Flourishing Fox. 2 cards go into hand there for Huschenbeth, and he just has to decide whether he'd rather have a Demonic Vigor come down and get him 2 more cards, or use one of the Thoughtseizes now. As we see the hand, getting the Thoughtseize up would be pretty nice. Just get that Zenith Flare before Javier even has a chance to consider using it. And that's exactly what he does. Spirit Dancer comes in for 3 and a Flourishing Fox off the top of the library. Not looking like it's enough here, Paul.
Yeah, and now we're gonna see the cycling show here from Javier, and he's gonna try to hope to get it done, but
he has to decide whether to cycle the Fox or play it. Feels like a cycle it moment here.
Yeah, at this point in the game, the Flourishing Fox is well past where it would be extremely effective here.
Right.
You really want it on turn one. Now, when you do have it on turn one, it can be just game breaking by itself. We've seen plenty of games where Flourishing Fox just kind of wins on turn one, but at this point in the game, you would much rather just cycle the Fox and try to just chain together some Zenith Flares.
Are we almost done here? I mean, this really feels like this game's just over.
Really
I know
close.
it's not literally over, but I mean, I'm not seeing how Javier can get his way out of this at this point.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's always those Zenith Flares, right? It's one of those things where it's just like, because it gains your life, so it buys you some time, right? And Thoughtseize, it's good at taking away the card in your hand, but not necessarily the card that's on top of your deck, right? So let's say, for example, Javier here goes cycle, 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 draw Zenith Flare, cast Zenith Flare, untap, draw another one. That's kind of his route, right? It's going to require him to be, pretty fortunate in his draws, but you can never necessarily count this deck out because there's always that chance.
In the meantime, an attack for 9 from the core Spirit Dancer is going to get blocked by Flameblade Adept just to try to maximize the possibility of that sequence that you just described, Paul. There's Flourishing Fox. Need to see Cycler, Cycler, Cycler here, and there's already a brick wall. Forgotten Cave will restart the festivities, but the Flameblade Adept looking awful here.
Yeah, just going to play it out and pass again and hope for another chain here.
Forgotten Cave's kind of an interesting cycler to have in hand, given that Huschenbeth does have a Thoughtseize. It's one of the few cyclers that he can't take away. All right, All That Glitters. This is the one that pumps up big time. This is really the most powerful when you're at this stage of the game. As you can see, SRAM jumping up to 6/6, and he's not going to stay that small for long either. So this is not quite lethal. Looks like 15.
Yeah, 15, and Javier can certainly chump block the 9/11 here. Oh, going for the double block, of course. If he went for a double block there and cycles, he could kill this ramp. But I think his plan, because it's just Zenith Flare, he'd rather just chump and just use this Hollow One on the following turn to chump again.
Yes, he falls down to 11 here after SRAM gets in there. Arne at a pretty healthy 14 right now. The Zenith Flare is at 7 after the Forgotten Cave gets cycled. It could be at 8 if he finds one. The ideal scenario, of course, is that he literally cycles 4 cards into it to get it up to 11, but that's still not quite lethal. There's really no way for him to actually kill next turn, right? Because even if he went cycle, 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 and then cycle, land, cycle, he can't do all of those things and still get to 14.
Yeah, he could theoretically cycle 5 times, which would be 12 damage.
Okay.
That's assuming he finds all 1-mana cyclers.
And that's if everything goes literal perfect for him.
Yeah. Oh, and this
this
slows
is
him down a little.
No, he's all in.
Yeah, you're not going to win by just removing one of those creatures. Okay.
He's 2 for 2. Womp. Branchloft Pathway, of course, doesn't have cycling. There's a Footfall Crater land, but Javier, well, actually, he is going to go ahead and cycle right now.
In case he finds a chump blocker.
Yeah, and it was a sack red found dry. That's not going to do it. He can chump block here and survive as the board sits, but there's a decent chance that the SRAM is also lethal. Although, as it stands, it's been kind of interesting because while Arne has pretty much gone off here, his hand kind of stinks, actually. When you look at it, like he's got another copy of SRAM, a whole bunch of lands, a Thoughtseize in his hand. It's not actually really what he wanted.
If it was Javier's plan... Wait, did he not block?
Oh, he just took it. Okay, well, I guess we're done here. There was no way for him to pick up the victory, and Arne Huschenbeth is 1 step away from top 8 now. He's found himself in this position before, and now he's knocking at the door again. These players are both 11-3. A 12th victory locks up top 8, and Arne looks pretty calm, cool, and collected, but he's got to be feeling some nerves here playing against Javier Dominguez.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for you Javier Dominguez fans, there are a few additional ways to interact after sideboard. So Javier now is Not just gold. I mean, he's still mostly goldfishing, but he is looking to bring in a baffling end and 2 copies of Fry, which would be some ways to kind of slow Arne down. One interesting thing that Arne can also try to do, outside of also just putting a bunch of auras onto his 2-mana creatures, is to put a bunch of auras onto a Hateful Eidolon. Because if you put a bunch of auras onto a Hateful Eidolon and you put in all that glitters onto it, it might just be really difficult for Javier to just have enough cards in his graveyard to race the lifelink damage, all the life that Arne could possibly gain by stacking up a Hateful Eidolon.
Yeah, pretend that instead of on SRAM, that was a Hateful Eidolon. All of those 3 attacks would have been 6 life gained each time. That's 18. I mean, that's going to soak up 1 good Zenith Flare on its own. Not like there's that many floating around. We really saw Thoughtseize as well. You mentioned it. There's not a lot of interaction between these 2 decks, but the interaction that they do have is quite important.
Yeah. And the really nice part here for Arne in this matchup is that typically the 2 different types of interaction that you have are good in different matchups. You've got your duress, right? And you've got your removal. But it turns out in this specific matchup, both are actually fine, right? Because you want to have the early removal for some of those cheap creatures. You don't want a Flourishing Fox to kind of run away with the game. And at the same time, in the late game, the way you lose is the Zenith Flare. So now you have the hand disruption to kind of protect you against that as well. So,
all right, time for our players to gather themselves and dial in here, because this game could decide a top 8 slot here if you're sitting in Arne's seat. And for Javier, well, he's been here before. He needs to fight. How does this opening hand look for him?
Roughly the same as most of the other opening hands that this deck can muster up, but it's just got a bunch of cyclers. He doesn't have the turn 1 Fox, which is something that he typically wants, but at the same time, the Zenith Flare is good, and he just wants to continue cycling. And it looks like he's choosing to just run out the healer here.
Interesting. You see that with the Stinger quite a bit, but rarely with the healer. Tradesies? No thank you, says Arne. He's just going to take the 2. And there's Zenith Flare in hand. Hollow one, go for blood, and a second hollow one.
I mean, he could potentially just fight the SRAM, right?
With go for blood?
You can go for blood. You're 2 for 1-ing yourself, but at the same time, if Arne untaps, he's going to draw a bunch of cards. So by going for this go for blood, you are still putting 2 cycling cards in your graveyard, and you're basically slowing down Arne's game plan.
Kind of has to now, right? I mean, why else would you run out the Dranith healer if that wasn't the plan? And there we go. Probably Javier was hoping for the 0-2 version like that, because that would have been a little bit better. And now you can see that Javier says, uh-oh, this one could be slipping away already. Caius goes for him, hits it now. It's a 2-4, go for blood, and the cycle train's going to roll here.
Needs maybe a 1
needs
mana
one,
cycle?
and he did actually found one. A Dranith Stinger can cycle for 1 and get a hollow one on the battlefield, but so? These 4/4s just don't seem very good. Now, the Zenith Flare's still a thing, but your opponent's untapping with now access up to 4 mana plus a Core Spirit Dancer on the battlefield.
Yeah, we're going to see a SRAM it to Heliod's Punishment here, I feel. It's going to just give Arne more cards. The hollow one is just going to be an irrelevant threat here. Oh, it looks like he's going to just continue stacking.
Get in there. It's got Vigilance anyway, so he gets a slam for 5. 2 2 different pathways in hand there for Javier. Those don't have cycling. He finds a cast out.
This one might actually, he might actually run this one out.
He might actually
there is a
cast it.
Kaya's Ghost form, so you saw him hover over there, so maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. Kaya's Ghost form pulling overtime here, and there is the Heliod's Punishment on the hollow one. Perhaps there's an opportunity for cast out to take out the punishment and block. It still doesn't seem great.
Right, and there's a Thoughtseize here, and this Zenith Flare is a Zenith Flare for 6, and there's a Thoughtseize, so Javier can go cycle and then Zenith Flare for 7, right?
On Arne, or to try to deal with one of these?
I think he's going That's, you know what? With the Kaya's Ghost form, I think he's gonna go to the face.
Yeah, the ghost
Yeah.
form is just screwing up everything here for
Look at
Javier, and he
Javier,
just
he's
says,
like,
"All right, let's just do this, I guess."
Sometimes you play a deck, you know, you're one of the top players in the world, and sometimes you play a deck that has lots of decisions, and other times you just cycle.
That's right.
Cycle and try to get there.
Hey, he can get there right here. In fact, with the pathway, he could even have 2 extra shots at it and still cast Zenith Flare. He's looking at his library saying, I just need a Zenith Flare. It will be lethal. Even the Hateful Eidolon +1 life here will only put him to 8. And right now the Zenith Flare does 8. So a Zenith Flare off the top of the library would be enough here. If Javier can find one this turn, that's a sheltered thicket.
Still do it.
He's still
Cycle.
alive. Oh,
No.
it's secluded step, and now he can't actually cast. Now, if he can find a blocker, he may be able to do it, but he's running out of gas here. One more cycle to
Hollow
go.
one? He's looking for a hollow one?
And
Now,
he
this is
can't
not a
find
lethal
what
attack.
he needs. And Arne Huschenbeth is primed for victory. Now, he doesn't quite have lethal
No,
at this point.
isn't lethal. Javier has another turn.
Unbelievable. Hey, this could be lethal, though.
It could be. Okay.
There's a
Does
cartouche.
that get it done? That's
He really just wants to see another all that glitters. That would just seal it up.
Cartouche is +3/+3.
Okay. And more
got
cards
2
going into
draws.
hand. Sajiri
Oh,
Shelter and a
no.
Thoughtseize. That's 8, 10, 11,
12.
12. Oh, God.
Oh my goodness.
This is so close. He's going to get another look, though, Paul. He's going to Myers Grasp the token and see if he can find something. And there's Kaya's Ghost form right there for Arne Huschenbeth.
That's enough.
Incredible stuff here from Arne.
That is 14 damage exactly.
And there's a Kaya's Ghost form to seal the deal. All Javier can do is look on. He's helpless against the lethal attack here from Arne Huschenbeth, who secures his first top 8. Congratulations to Arne Huschenbeth. A fantastic victory and a crazy run from him. You know, we've had him on coverage a lot over the course of the weekend, and you can't help but get invested in a young player breaking out here at the top level, and he's got there, a top 8 in the books.
Yeah, I mean, you can see just how much this means to him. You know, all the practice, all the time you spent preparing for this event,